So this morning we talked about user authentication, right? To answer that first question, are you who you say you are? That's how we can now identify patent B as such, right? Because we had a login form that's going to send the email and it's going to send the password back to the back end. Once we get to the back end, we're going to be able to go and find a user based on the username, that we passed in. And then the password here, right, will go in as the password. Once we find a given user, we'll be able to authenticate. How does authenticate work? Because we have has secure password living in the user model, it talks to password on the Ruby object side, but on the database side, there is a field in the migration called password digest, and that's where like the hash version of everything lives. That's where we're actually authenticating from, is password digest, getting checked against this password string, using that special bcrypt double equals, which then allows us to redirect to an individual user who we've attempted to log in. Now, the step that we missed here, because we're just in the README, is like setting the actual ID for the session, right? We find our email in our actual code base, get the user from the email address, set the session user ID at that point, which gives us a session to work with, right? Now the session is storing a cookie on the client's machine. Therefore, every request that the client makes, they can give us their session, they can tell us who they are as a user, we can look up that user at certain routes and do certain things at that given route. So as we talk about transitioning from authentication to authorization, I think that the main things we're going to go over are how do I, in the context of a view, determine whether something is authorized to be seen or not. And then secondly, before I even get to a view, how can I determine in the controller if something should be seen or not? So right now, I am in this shirt store, right? There's various shirts that have been created in the app. I have the ability to make purchases. We've already kind of like handled the sales section where we worked on forms and stuff. So here now, we have an index page. And on the index page, we have an invitation to create a user, an invitation to log out, an invitation to log in, and then we have this like welcome message, right, to the current user. I personally think that these ternaries are a little bit clunky. I would strongly prefer myself to just see like ifs so that the view is like nice and visual. I'm going to say if there is no current user, if bang at current user. And then I'm going to display one kind of thing. And then down here, I'm going to do an else and display something else. Oops. So if we don't have a current user, this is where I'd probably just want to say welcome. Otherwise, it's where I want to welcome the current user. This is kind of confusing though. If bang current user, I don't like that. Let's do the if we have a current user. And SA would be a cool case, but I'm just going to say else. So here I'm just going to say users, and maybe we don't even welcome the user. Just say users like we had before. But here we can say welcome current user and be sure that it's a current user that we'd like to welcome every single time, because we just kind of broke this out into an if-else end. So authorization 101 is, now that you are who you say you are, what can I show you in the view? We can decide that based on like if we have a current user who is present, a current user will only be present once again if if the user who is arriving at the index page is carrying a session user ID, which also corresponds to a user that's currently saved in the database. So now if we go back to the index of users, oops, well, that won't work at all. I left out the slash. Cool. Localhost 3000 users, oh sure, and I just referred to the whole user instance. I should probably say .name, right? Current user .name. Welcome patent B. Great. So that's me logged in as patent B. I can also click log out. This is kind of confusing though. It just says users. I can still click log out though. That's not going to do anything for me. Conversely, if I go and log in as patent B again, which I totally can, I can go back to my index and I can still click log in and like log in as somebody else, which feels really weird to me in a way that I don't really want to explore too deeply, because like who cares? I don't want to log in again as I've already been logged in. I don't want to see this at all, right? If I'm logged in as a user, I should only see a log out button. If I'm logged out as a user, I should only see an invitation to log in. So we could use this same kind of pattern here, this like if current user, else end. Here we could do like if we have a current user, let's have a link to a log out. Otherwise, let's have a link to log in. All right, kind of break these up into conditions. So this is very general kind of authorization, right? We're authorizing based on whether or not somebody is logged in. Cool. We're logged in, we can see log out only. We click log out, we can only see log in. That's fantastic. This is the flow that I like. That starts to feel a lot more like a real web page, huh? Yodo. Just testing my validation out again. Cool. Stalwart patent.brave, YOLO. I'm logged back in. Cool. So we have this conditional display that we can access. Another thing that we can do is decide, should we even be able to go somewhere and look at something? So maybe this is a place that I can list all of the users, but it's only going to be a link to the user if I am that user, right? So I can basically like make an authorization based on ownership, right? If you are this user, you can see this user's account, or you can see this user's posts, or you could see a button to edit this content only if the content belongs to you. So as we iterate through this index and we generate links for users, right? We're doing this link to user.name user. Well, we also now have access to an @current user. So we could do something like this, another if case. If current user is the same as the user, and in this case, I'm just going to check the IDs because I don't know what kind of object equality is going to get tested there. I'm just going to test the IDs equality. If the IDs are there, I would really like this to say a link to the user's name. Otherwise, I would not like that. I would just like it to say just the user's name without being clickable in an effort to secure my app a little bit more. So this will just, no, don't even need a link to, just need user.name. Oops. User.name can be the only thing in here. And then we'll end it. Cool. So if we refresh here and take another look, now only patent B is the link, right? I can only click and go to patent B's, right? That's the only user. Right? That's the only one that'll work. Well, hang on. I'm a malicious user. I'm gonna go to user/9. Haha. I'm in. I've cracked the mainframe. Right? I'm looking at Smitty's like sacred cursed profile, but I'm only supposed to be able to look at my own. Right? So it's not enough to just change what something looks like in a view. If a user still has access to a URL bar, or if the user still accesses like Postman or something like that. Even a post route or a delete route that you'd only expect to be accessed by a form or a button is still something that a user can access. So just authorizing in the view isn't going to be enough here. By the way, we could have even kept like anything from showing up, right? Could have just shown nothing at all and only iterated through until we found like the list of users that is the current user. Not sure why we do that in terms of this code, but in terms of like totally hiding something, we could do that as well. In this case, let's go to the controller. Let's look at the user show page. And let's say that I only want to access this page, right, where I'm seeing this user's list of shirts and stuff, if I actually am that user. What we could do now is in the user's controller, before we get to the show route, we could have a condition. We could say something like, if the user that we try to find based on their session ID if we're able to find this user and then we call .id on that user is the same as our params ID. Then we're going to put match. And then we're also going to do a user as user.find. And then we will render the way that we want to. Render show. Otherwise, we're going to redirect. I'm also going to set this redirect to, and then I might just like interpolate the session user ID right in the URL. So I'll say /users/ I just want to put them back where they belong. Whatever account they actually have. So my goal here is to use my controller, right, with some of the conditional logic. If, oh, sorry, I missed something here. Oh, it's because I have this bracket open but not closed. Thank you. Yeah, so I need to redirect here if I am trying to find a user to look at that is not myself. So if I go to user/9 as user 14, I should get redirected back to my own page. And I can even do one of these like flash warning. Oops. Equals, that ain't you. And then like a winky face, so that like we can just show them that we're as insipid as all get out. Cool. So we're gonna do a flash warning here, and then maybe when we get back to the user show page, we'll be able to display a flash warning at that point. We'll do it right here. Interpolate. Oops. Flash warning. Great. So let's look at this flow. If I go back to my users list, right, I can click on my own. And, ooh, wait, I can't go to my own anymore. Let me try to go to somewhere else's. Users/9. So it did redirect. Notice how it says users 14? So it's doing the redirect. It knows that it's trying to get me to go to another user when it doesn't match. It did change the 9 to a 14. Here's the problem. Parameters are stored as strings. So I pulled a user from the database and the ID is an integer. Param's ID is not. If I 2i param's ID, this should work. It's one of the little nitpicky things. But that works just fine. I can go to users 14. I did get the flash for the redirect last time. If I refresh, the flash should go away. If I go back here and I try to go to users 9, redirected, that ain't you, right? Or I could just go the real way, and then I don't get a nice like flash message during the redirect because I didn't need to get redirected, right? So this is something we could do. This feels a little clunky to me, personally. We'll come back to it and do some refactoring in a little bit. One thing that I'd like to dig into, though, is the idea that, like, I shouldn't be able to create a new shirt, right? We have this idea where a shirt could be created or updated. So I should be able to go to shirts, just to jog memory on this. We have these various shirts. We can go to create a shirt, color, message, image, or price, right? My issue is I'm not logged in as a user. I want to take away the user from this form. I want to start using the user that's currently logged in to like refactor this. But that means that a user must be logged in or else this whole thing would break. Like if I took away this dropdown as the person who's going to create the shirt and tried to convert that into using the session data on the back end, I'm going to have some real problems because if I'm not logged in, then there is no user and then I'm not able to finish making that shirt, which does belong to a creator. So let's talk about this. How do I keep it from going to shirts new if I'm not logged in? In shirts at new, we could do something like, how about this? Redirect to the login path, because we did create a path, and according to our Rails routes this morning, that path was called the login path. It's right here for get login. So we want to redirect to login path, but only in the event that there is no session user ID. So I'll say if session user ID is nil. Let's be more specific. Let's say that like if there is a session user ID and we attempt to find a user, just to be really sure of ourselves. If we try to find a user where the ID is the session user ID, because sometimes the session user ID will be there, but the user won't. Let's make sure there's actually a user there, right? So we're going to redirect to the login path unless user find by ID session user ID returns something truthy. So if this line doesn't work, if we can't find a current user, then we should redirect to the login path. Let's see what that looks like. Shirt's new. Oh yeah, that's right. We do have a user. We are logged in. Let's see how the redirect works. Let me delete my cookies. If I go here, application, what's the name of this particular one? Shirtsy session. Goodbye, Shirtsy session. I'm gonna refresh. And look, I've been redirected now to my login, right? We've redirected unless the user is findable. The user was not findable, so now we have managed to redirect back to the login path. Now I can log back in as Patton, YOLO. And then maybe here is where I want to have another link to create a new shirt on the user show to like kind of close this flow. So we're going to do a link to something else. Link to new shirt. And this will be the new shirt path, following our RESTful routing conventions. Oh no, something went wrong. What went wrong? Let's look at the back end and find out. ERB, started get, nothing to do. That missing parenthesis I'm not looking at for right now, right? That was from before. Oh yeah, I see what it is. I didn't close this. Just a little syntax error. Let's try it again. Cool. So we can click on new shirt. Now we're at new shirts, right? We know that we could only get here if we were logged in because we tested that out. So I feel really secure now that I'm here that we could get rid of this particular reference to a user in the shirts form. So that's what I'm going to do next. In our shirts, remember we had our form partial here? I'm just going to get rid of the creator ID. Don't need it. We will have a break tag, I guess, before the submit, though. Why not? If we refresh, that means we're not setting creator ID from the form. That means that when a shirt goes and gets created, right, we're not going to include creator ID here in the strong params. So what we could do instead is do something like this. A user, as a model, when we set this up earlier, we associated a user with shirts, right? User has many shirts, foreign key, creator ID. Because a user has many shirts and we know how to set the foreign key of creator ID for each shirt that belongs to the user, when we go to create the user in the shirts controller, we could do something like here, user.findByID session user ID, right? We knew that we were logged in to submit the form, and if we wanted to make sure, right, because people do have Postman, we'd probably want to also have some authorization before the create route, where we'd redirect, like we can't create unless we're logged in as a user, because this step needs to run. We need to find the user that we currently are. I'll say current user equals user.findByID session user ID, and with that current user, we could say current user dot shirts, because that's the name of the association on our user model, has many shirts. Now this shirt that we're creating will be one shirt from shirt params, but creator ID will already be set to this current user's ID because the active record association will let us do that. So this way, if we have a current user, which we are patent right now, I should be able to submit and create a shirt. Let's try gray wolves. Wolf.png, price is 11, create shirt. Check it out, that's automatically now added under patent B's shirts. The creator was set because we already had a current user to call on, because our session user ID was usable to find a user with that ID. Once we found that user, we were able to set that user and call user.shirts. It's the same as calling shirt.new, except when you do it through a has many association, the thing that new thing is going to belong to has the foreign key set for it. So because the user was setting its shirt, the shirt got its creator set automatically. So in terms of creation, that's kind of cool, right? We've totally now let this app feel like a real app. Whichever user is currently logged in is going to be the one that made that shirt. If I was able to go and make a completely new account, users, we could go whole flow from scratch. We go to log out. Uh-oh, here's a problem. These things happen, right? We run into this from time to time. If at current user.id equals user ID, except we don't always have a current user, do we? So we need to also control for the presence of the absence of a current user as well as the presence of one. And this is happening in the shirtsy index HTML under users. So we go to the users index. We find the problem, which was right here. We were assuming the existence of current user, but the second that we logged out, we didn't have one of those. So I would say something like this: if we have a current user, if it exists as a truthy object, right? I could even technically say like bang bang current user, which would take an object and turn it into true if it's truthy. So like we could say, I'm just gonna hop into an IRB here to demonstrate this. If I really cared about something being true or false, it won't really matter. But if I say puts 2, that's gonna puts 2. If I say puts bang 2, that puts false because 2 was truthy. If I say puts bang bang 2, I coerce the truthy 2 back into true. If I say puts bang bang nil, I coerce the falsy nil into false, right? That's the thing I was talking about here with the bang bang, but it's kind of redundant here. I'm just going to say if we have a current user and the IDs match up. Cool. So now we just see a list of usernames, but there's no link provided to go to a page. Since I'm not logged in, every time I try to go to a user page, ooh, that's a problem. No method error in user controller show. That's right. Because like I didn't even want to get to this show page at all if I wasn't already logged in as some user, because if the show page for a user is trying to redirect to some other user, if this first user isn't reached, that could be a problem, huh? I kind of feel like the safest thing to do would be to like do another current user thing here in the show page. At current user is this user, right? If we have a current user, so if the user that we find .id, here we go, then we want to redirect to like whoever the current user is. This might clarify some things, right? Like we're going to either match a current user or we're going to redirect to a current user. But either way, we're going to assume that a current user needs to be dealt with, right? But what if there is no current user? Here's something that I'd like to do. We redirected. Let's do a redirect if there is no current user, right? If we can't set a current user at all, if we can't do a user.findBy, let's do a redirect. So what I'd like to do here is make another method maybe called def ensure login or ensure logged in. Actually, to be really general with it, I'm just going to call this authorize, because it's like the most basic authorization. Do I even know that you are somebody? Therefore, if I can't, then you have to go tell me who you are. So here is our user.findBy. And this is either going to return a user or it's going to return nil, because either the session stores a user ID or it stores an invalid ID or nothing at all. So I'm going to say if we can do this, then we'll just return. Actually, I'm going to flip it. If we can't find this user, let's do a redirect. Redirect to the login path. If we don't have a user, we're going to go log in. Here's the cool thing about this authorize method. If I declare it as a method like this, I have another option that I can call on. Before I even get to the show, I can declare something called a before action. Before action authorize, right? And then, as I'm authorizing, like, if we can't find a user, we're going to redirect to the login path every single time. Let's see how that works. Users 9, def show, let's refresh. Look, we redirected to the login path, right? We go to the user's index. We redirected to the login path. I didn't want that. So we can add this. We can say only show. Just for the show route, do we want to do that kind of redirect? For the other routes, we don't want to step in before the route starts running and redirect. We'd actually like to see stuff. So when we try to get to a user show page when we're not logged in, it won't let us see anybody's because we don't have a user that we could find. So I've written a lot of code here. It does a lot of things, but I think that it does a lot of the same things. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is how to refactor, because we've kind of covered at this point most of the things that you're going to do with authorization. We're going to have some conditional display and some views. We're going to have some conditional redirecting based on a current user and whether they match up. We might have some conditional redirecting even before we hit a route based on whether a user is logged in or based on whether a user owns a resource. We could have another kind of thing here, for example, in if we had like a shirts update, maybe we're going to make sure that the current user is the same as the creator of the shirt before we go ahead and update. So similar checks there and stuff. But let's talk about refactoring our code, because here we have like a user find by ID session user ID, user find by ID session user ID. That happens all the time. User find by ID session user ID. Here's what we could do. We have this helpers folder. Let's see. Jason's asking, could we do something like before action on the application controller and not let anyone into anything unless logged in? You absolutely could, Jason. You definitely would want to make sure that you made an exception for the login route itself, though. because, you know, who cuts the barber's hair and that kind of thing, right? I have to be able to get to the login page to set a session at minimum. So I would never want to include the login page in the list of pages I'll redirect from if you're not logged in. Good question. We have something called helpers here. Helpers are places that we can build things that will help us in the view. I'm going to make a sessions helper here. The other cool thing about a helper is that by default, sorry, I wrote sessions helper in the chat, is that by default, a helper file is going to be a module. And a module is nice for us because a module is just methods that we can pack up and port to other places. So we just have module shirts helper, right? And here we could say module sessions helper. And here's where I'd want to put work that like the view could call on or that a controller could call on to do some stuff that I'm going to do over and over. So for example, I want to have a method called current user. And the job of this method is to return the current user of the app based on the session. That's one repeatable behavior that I want to be able to do kind of forever. Def logged in. That would be nice to have a quick check. Logged in. Returns true if there's a current user. False otherwise. And then here's, I think we could also put an authorized method if we wanted to. Def authorized. Maybe this is the better place because I feel like there's a lot of things that we'd want to redirect to login, like more than one controller that might want to know this, but anything that gets the sessions helpers can use the sessions helper, including all of our views, which is kind of cool. So if we have authorized and we say like redirect to the login path. Oh, but now we could say unless logged in, right? So unless logged in, well, if it's true and there's a current user and false otherwise, and I have that bang bang trick, I could probably just say bang bang the return value of current user. If I have a current user that logged in is true, if I don't have a current user logged in is going to be false, and then that can be the hinge that authorized works on. That's kind of fun. To create the current user, we just use that code that we had before. User.findBy session user ID, but without the bang. User.findBy ID is session user ID, so current user is either going to return nil if it fails or a current user object if it succeeds. And with these kind of things in place, I'm wondering now, when we go to the users controller, do I need to say authorize here when I go to the show page, or could I simply say include sessions helper? That's what I'm going to check and see if I can do. By taking out authorized from here, have I successfully refactored it in here? And authorized now relies on logged in, which relies on current user. So this would kind of show in one shot if everything is working together. And if not, got some debugging to do. So I'm going to try to go to the show page in the session. I'm going to go to users first. Can I see that? Cool. Not logged in as anybody because I see no links. I see a login button. That's how I can verify my status now in the app. Let's go to users 9. No method error in users controller show. No, authorized. Did I mean authorized? I did not. I meant authorize. So I was trying to include this module sessions helper. Oh, but I did call it authorized here, didn't I? I should call it just authorize, huh? I guess I was right there, huh? If it's asking, did I mean authorized? Shoo, that's working just fine. User/9, user/14, whatever user you got. Can't go there because I'm not logged in. So now that I've got this like sessions helper stuff working, like, let's say that I do go log in, go back in as Patton the Brave, stalwart Patton the Brave. We're logged in. I go back. It says welcome Patton B. Let's go back to that index page and do some refactoring real quick, right? If current user, I don't need an instance variable anymore, right? When I go to this user's controller, I don't need to set at current user at all. I can refer to it as a method that comes from my sessions helper. So I'm just going to say current user.name. If there's a current user and the current user ID equals user ID, I guess this is an easier way to say this case now, if we're logged in. If somebody's logged in and the current user is the same as this user, that's even a nicer way to read it out. Let's see if this still works. Yup. Still seems to. Oh, interesting though. This is a problem. This says log in, but this still points to patent B. Why is that? Ah, at current user. I missed one. That's better. Log out because I'm logged in. I have a link to my own user profile. If I try to go to somebody else's user profile, I still get like redirected. How did that happen again? We were in the user's controller. We went to a show page. We don't need to do this current user thing again because we've already got a helper for that. This includes sessions helper, so we can just say if current user.id, and down here we can just redirect to current user. That's an interesting thought though. I'm in a route right now. If I go get current user is going to search the database. And then if I try to redirect to current user, I'm calling that method again. I'm going to search the database again. So you might see something like this in your code. And this means a couple of things. The underscore means like, don't use this. This is just a variable that we're keeping because we want to keep its scope for some reason. And then the next part reveals why we want to keep the scope. I'm saying I'm going to set an instance variable for current, and I'm just going to return it if I've already got it. Or if I don't have a value for this, then we're going to search the database. So the very first time we call current user, it's going to have to go here and set the value for at current. But the second time in the same route that we call on current user, it's going to call that method again. It's going to still have a stored value for the instance variable, and it's just going to be able to return that without talking to the database a second time. You're going to see code like this in the wild. This syntax piece here in the name of a variable basically means like, don't really use me as myself, just let me do my job that I'm doing with scope. And then here, let's set it, but only conditionally if we don't already have it. So if we have something like this, we should still be able to go to the user show page without errors. We should still be able to like get redirected after going to the wrong. Cool. That's still looking pretty solid. I'm looking around to see if there's any other pieces where we've used current user as an instance variable. I could say at current just to see. Nah, nothing there. What about where I've referred to session user ID? So we have some auth readme stuff, sessions controller. Some stuff's happening in the sessions controller. Let's see what's happening in the sessions controller. In here, oh yeah, there's an opportunity here maybe. Well, let's see. Is there? I feel like this is a place that I don't really want to use current user, right? User.find by email. See, I'm not doing the finding by ID because it's not about a session. This is setting a session, so I can't really like extrapolate any of this stuff away just because I say session user ID. As I go through here, in the shirts controller, we don't need the current user call here. That's redundant. We could simply say at shirt equals current user.shirts. Current user then would have to call on the method in the sessions helper. Ooh, so I think if I don't include the sessions helper here, shirts controller is going to break on creation now because it's not going to know what this method is. Let me just confirm that before I add some code in without knowing exactly what it's going to do. I'm going to make a new shirt. We're going to say color clear. Nope. Price is 3. Yeah, awesome. Undefined local variable or method current user in create exactly there because we did not include the helper that we had created to help us with these methods. So I'm going to say include sessions helper. And maybe this is the time that you go back to that inheritance or composition lab and just scan through that README a second time just to double check your like understanding of how modules get included and stuff. But I'm just going to refresh the post. And we did create that shirt the second time going through because it was able to find the current user now that it knows about the sessions helper. In terms of authorization concerns in your application, I think that some of the more common stuff that we're doing is like here in the shirts create, like, oh, let's redirect to the login path. Oh yeah, what's this? That's the authorize thing again, right? Let's do before new and create. Let's do the authorize. Before action authorize. And we're only going to do it on the new and create. So now there should still be an index of shirts that we can look at as a user. I'm logged in as Patton now. Oh, we have a syntax error before action. Oh, I missed a comma. There's all the shirts. If I was to go and log out, which I'm going to do just from the cookies here. So now I'm logged out. I can look at all my shirts, right? I shouldn't be able to create a shirt. If I click this, it takes me to the login, right? So perhaps something I could help with in this authorize piece, one more refactor is I could tell somebody what I just did. Flash warning equals you must be logged in to do that. Ooh, but you know what? Now I can't do my I can't do my flashy thing, right? I don't want to set a flash every time and then redirect conditionally. So this is where I need to take my nice single line thing and accept that it's not simple enough for my condition anymore because I want to do more than one thing based on the condition. I'll say if we're not logged in. Usually it's easiest to start a sentence with if. The only time I like to use unless is when I'm continuing a condition. So if we're not logged in, we're going to set a flash warning, you must be logged in to do that, and then we'll redirect to the login path. Then we could go to our view for a new session, and we could also have a flash warning here. Oops. Something along those lines. So now every time I try to create a shirt that I'm not supposed to be able to create yet, it tells me why I must be logged in. Cool. If I try to go to like just from here, well, maybe it's the link. No, it's not the link. I try to go to a user I'm not supposed to see. Everything comes back to the login. Reminds me of what's going on and gives me a chance to log in if I can. Maybe here would be a good time for me to say like, I want to have a link to creating a user account. Maybe I already have an account, so I should like not be logging in. I should be signing up, right? So sessions new. We could say here, already have an account. Let me do a little link to. Or sorry, yeah, don't have an account. That's what I meant to say. Link to sign up. And then this will be a new user path. Cool, don't have an account, sign up, I click. Now I'm on my new user path. On my new user path, I should probably have a similar link back, right? That was the one I was thinking about first. Say something like, I already have an account. Well, I just wanted to change the first word, actually. Already have an account, link to log in. Dear goodness. Pinky hit the touchpad. And we'll say login path. I can't stress enough how much doing the like grunt work of putting your own links into your own code is going to speed up your process of debugging your own application later on. Add links now when you know you need it. Name newbie, email noob@sample.com, password YOLO, create user. Cool. So now we have newbie as a new user that we were able to create. We can go and make a new shirt for newbie. Color teal, message wolves, price 6. That's created. We can now go back and look at all the shirts. You can see the nice teal shirt that it's been created by newbie. We can click here and go to the profile. I think the last thing to do might be to like loosen this restriction on going to a user's profile, because I feel like it would be nice to have links to like other users looking at the page later on to like view shirts that they want to buy. So I should be able to see somebody else's shirts, but like when I'm looking at somebody else's shirt page, it should not be giving me an opportunity to create a new shirt of my own, like as though it's going to be under them. So what I'm kind of thinking of refactoring is in my shirts controller, at the show route, users controller at the show route rather, we don't need to do authorizing anymore. I'll quiet that down. And then in the show page itself for a user is where I'd want to make a change and get more specific. So here, instead of having a link to a new shirt always, this is where we could have our check. Let's see, if current user .id is the same as whichever user we're looking at right now, .id, then we'll say add a new shirt, and we'll end this right here. So now if I'm looking at my own page, ooh, what about this too? If I'm looking at my own page maybe like I already know my own username. So instead of seeing user.name.titleize, what if that was only happening if I wasn't a current user? But if I was, it would just say your shirts, right? We could do something like that. It would be kind of fun too. If logged in, then we'll do the username titleize as shirts. Sure, yeah. And otherwise we won't. Else case. And this should say your shirts instead. This pattern, I know, might look a little clunky in terms of like having like if-else's on separate lines. You'll thank me later when you do this instead of ternaries, and then later on the line itself needs to get super long because of like styling things that you're adding. Like you're bringing in bootstrap, so every line of HTML becomes twice as long because of CSS stuff. I'm going to just say your shirts. That's what I want. Your shirts if I'm logged in, some other username shirts if not. So we go here, looking at 15, I am newbie, so that's my shirts, right? I can click to add a new shirt from here as newbie, that's great. If I go to user 9, can I travel there? It still redirected me to user 15. Let me see what I missed here. Users, controller, in the show route. Ah, that's right. So the authorize I think we did actually want. I don't think we want to look at a user that's not a logged in person. I think we really want to make the change here to talk about the specific user that we've got. So I don't think it actually needs to do this whole redirecting anymore. I think that we literally still just want to say user is user.find. Don't need to put some match. Don't need to say to render the show because we're already in the show. We don't need to worry about redirecting to the current user with a cheeky message. We don't need to worry about finding a match of IDs because that happens in the view. So we're just back to what we had before with a typical show. And with a page that now will let me move between user and user. User is 9. Ooh, it still says my shirts though. I didn't like that. User's 14. Still says my shirts. So what did we miss there? Let's take a look at that. A lot of times you have to like check out the view itself to make sure that it's displaying the way that you want to. If logged in, your shirts, else. Oh, that's right. I'm not logged in. Wait, no, I think I am logged in. Let's double check. How can we check? At the users page. Yeah, it says welcome newbie. I'm totally logged in right now. So what's missing? Couldn't find a user with ID 6. That's fair. Let's go back to users 9. But it still says my shirts. Yeah, Jason, good question. When I put in YOLO password from multiple accounts, the hash salt thing most definitely does make them all look different. Let me take a break for 1 second, just demonstrate that real quick. Rail C. This is where it gets fun. I'm going to create one, and create another one off the same password. Yeah, this is where the salt gets applied to the hash. Oh, cool, like a monkey on a typeboard wrote an actual word that I recognize. That's fun. What a coincidence. So yeah, the hash salt thing is what makes them look different. It's random, like character shifting based on a randomly generated number every time we set a password. Coming back to this, I'm wondering, right, if logged in, this is happening in the user's show, and I'm hoping that logged in is going to run and return true, right? Because how does logged in run? That checks to see if there's a current user. There is a current ID in the session that corresponds to a user that's in the database. Yeah, is it because it checks a cookie? Let's see. If logged in, I feel like I'm in a view. I'm talking to current user here, right? It's only, let's see, for add a new shirt, right? Let's see if add a new shirt is always showing. Users 9 doesn't show that. Users 14 shows some shirts for that user. I'm logged in as user 15. Add a new shirt shows up. So it's able to call the current user method from this view. That tells me that I've missed something in here. Like I've typed this weird. If logged in, else end. Got some opening and closing things. Username titleizes shirts. Your shirts. Is it that the else has 2 spaces? Would that be it? I don't think it would be. That would be extremely tedious. Your shirts, but I need to go to the other one. I need to go to 14 as the control. Yeah. So I'm not sure why logged in is not firing the way that I'm expecting it to. Let's check and see. Under sessions helper, we have logged in as a method, logged underscore in. Have a show page. If logged underscore in. Else, and I'm confused. What if I said if not logged in your shirts? Yeah, then it switches. Very interesting, though. Oh, I know what it is, y'all. I'm still logged in. Yes, very good. Yes. Ellis just pointed out I am still logged in, right? So it's always going to do the shirts because logged in just checks to see if there is a current user at all. It doesn't check on the status of that current user. So I think here's where I'd want to do something like this, right, as our condition, just like we did it down here. Not just that I'm logged in, but who am I logged in as? Is the person that I'm currently logged in as the same as the person who's focused on the page right now? Users 14, that's Pat and B's. Users 15, that's back to mine. Thanks a lot. Yeah, that definitely does it. So yeah, this is some view side authorization stuff. We're checking to see if this user is the same as somebody we're looking at. In other places, we check to see if we're logged in at all. Generally, we're doing that in the controller as we prepare to like redirect through that kind of authorize method. We created a helper file in the helpers folder, and that's holding on to various methods that we can reuse to manage our session. We have some various like sugary syntax things going on to like kind of memoize the user that we find from the database so that we only have to find it one time per route instead of calling on a database every single time current user is referred to in a view or a controller. These helpers work in views by default, but they do not work in controllers by default. So any controller that we wanted to use those helper methods in, we had to include the session's helper. Otherwise, we would have been out of luck when it came time to run those helper methods. All those helper methods hinge on the session. The session hinges on the authentication, which hinges on that bcrypt password. And that, in a nutshell, is how all of these things kind of come together to give us what we call auth on the web. We have the one side of it where we verify who somebody is, and then we have various controls before actions and redirects and so forth in the controller, which are going to keep us away from routes that that user is not supposed to go to. And when we do render things at those routes, we're going to keep users from seeing things that they shouldn't see. We could use this kind of conditional display to hide an edit button from people that didn't create that resource and shouldn't be editing it. We can also use a controller side authorize before action to keep people out of that update route, even if they're sophisticated enough to try to update something without having an edit form first. So we really do want to be authorizing on both sides of it, not just in the view or just in the controller, but kind of in both to make sure that the user is well guided and that our controller is well protected too. I'm wondering at this time if anybody has any questions on these helper methods, how we calculate who the current user is based on the session, how we make decisions about what to show to which user and when. Cool. So if there are no other questions for now, I will go ahead and do the best I can to get this video uploaded. That's probably the biggest bottleneck in my flow that I've noticed. I miss my upload speed from work for sure. But I will get video and code uploaded here. Shirtsy will be updated with this authorization stuff. And then throughout the week, I think I might actually try to flesh this app out, apply some CSS to it, actually make some interesting shirts be in the database. We'll see if I have time between various like one-on-one calls and prep for mod stuff and all that. But yeah, for now, thanks so much for checking in. I will get this code and video up as soon as possible so that people can still review it. You'll find that it's still the same overall auth README. The stuff that I've talked about now is just kind of in the last third or quarter of that README as we talk about various pieces that we can do. They have a completely different syntax and flow that they do to kind of attack helpers from the other side, where like they say like helpers and then basically add some methods which makes them accessible in the view that is served by that controller. So it's kind of an inside-out way to do what I did. Play with both syntaxes this week if you have the ability to stretch out into both. Otherwise, I'll catch you at the next one. Cheers, y'all.